Arc Raiders saw its first wipe via Expeditions yesterday, and with it, everything is reset functionally speaking. Today I want to take some time to share with you some of the best ways to get back what you may have lost, levels, skill points and tree decisions, blueprints, and more. Today we're running down a few post-wipe tips that I think can really be beneficial to you. Drop your thoughts down below, drop a like if you enjoy the video, and make sure to subscribe for more Arc Raiders and other FPS content. I'd love to have you in the community, but for now, let's get into it. So first, let's talk about leveling here, because of course, if you did take part in the expedition, your level wherever you were before wipe is now reset down to level 0. So whether 75, 65, wherever you may have been, you're now level 0 after the wipe, or were level 0. Ranking up is imperative because it impacts your skill tree decisions and how you end up getting those skill points for it. So how can you get back to a point where you feel comfortable with how many skill points you have that you can spend however you want? Let's talk about a quick refresher on how XP itself works. XP can be gained in Arc Raiders by scavenging, damaging Arc machines, destroying Arc machines, assisting in destroying Arc machines, damaging raiders, knocking out raiders, exploring, spending time on surface, and getting things like a safe return bonus. Some of those have different XP breakdowns and windows, but ultimately, as always with a game that is PvPvE, you can take this one of two different ways, either engaging players or not engaging players. Personally speaking, I found the more relaxing of the two options here is a strat of just simply opening quite literally everything. This you'll run on a map that's high density in loot, like a buried city, a Stella Montis, something that's a little bit smaller in map size but has a lot of condensed loot areas around you. You want to make sure that you're going to those higher density loot areas and hit absolutely every container that you see, whether it is something that you're looting for the first time and there's actual genuine loot in there, or if somebody already opened it up, doesn't matter. Still hit that because you'll end up getting 200 XP for every single container you end up opening up. Running around the map that you choose on this for a good 15 to 20 minutes of a raid just looting, you're going to come out with anywhere between like 20 to 30k XP per raid on average, which if you look at the ranges of the XP you need for ranking up, especially early on, you're going to get some matches that you even double up your ranks. You'll rank up twice in a single game. And even in the later ranks where everything is 49,000 XP per rank, you're going to be getting a skill point almost every other match at that point if you can keep that pace up. Now, yeah, it is boring at times, but it's honest, it's chill work. I can't promise that you'll always have people that are chill with you and that won't be trying to fight you just for the sake of fighting. Depending on location, depending on the sort of matchmaking you have, it sometimes is shoot on sight, but truly, I am a believer in that aggression matchmaking rumor. I feel like the less you engage players with fighting, the more you try and play a little more passive, then the less immediately hostile players you'll end up finding. Wipe time, that might be a bit different. I did have quite a few games of back and forths and solos yesterday where I had plenty of people that were chill, even offering up some of the stuff they found for free, and then I had others that I didn't even get a chance to be like, hey, congrats, dude, I didn't even bring in a shield, so like, have fun getting absolutely nothing on my body as they chase me into the outskirts of maps just trying to harvest things for trials and scrappy, only to be blasted in the back with a shotgun. But more often than that, I feel like after a certain amount of games, things are relatively chill. Now, personally speaking, having done this, it took me to about level 20 in 6-ish hours of so, perhaps, which was a really nice passive strategy. Again, I'm not really risking a whole lot of loot, I'm just farming XP. Now, PvP, of course, is something that is also another option. PvP in particular has some interesting sets of breakdowns, with damage dealt being around to 1, the amount of health that you knock from an enemy at that point, and then looting raider corpses is also 500 XP every time you do that. So if you can end up taking a squad fight or something like that, make sure that you're, as a squad, rotating in and out and checking what bag has what. Even if you just open it up for a split second, that's a difference between 500 XP and 1500 XP, just for simply checking the other two bodies that your trio may have ended up killing. Now, if you can somehow stumble late into combat, like the fight's already done and over with, the players have moved on, if you're not wanting to fight anybody, if you stumble across dead bodies, loot them all, or rather check their bags to see if they have anything even worthwhile, because at the very least, you're getting 500 XP per raider you end up seeing, which is pretty nice, especially if you're somebody that like joins a late raid in Stella Montis or something like that. Chances are there's going to be fighting that happened up until that point. So you're going to be getting the potential of a lot of free XP for literally nothing. And unlike some things like blueprints or loot that you need to take out, you could theoretically just go in absolutely naked with no shield, no rechargers, bandages, no gun, nothing like that. And you could just honestly search around for things like dead bodies, because that is banked immediately. Even if you just abandon the raid, what you did still applies. Personally though, as somebody that likes to chill and interact with other gamers, I end up just doing the open everything strat. Next, let's talk about some blueprints, because that was also something that you ended up losing. Whether you had 5 blueprints or all blueprints, they're gone now, unfortunately, after the wipe. This is, of course, something that you can look at things like high-tier loot locations, breachable rooms, those things that are like general tips that do apply, absolutely, but they're more general. They're more things that aren't necessarily something that points you in a direct line of focus on how you can end up getting these. But I think personally, the biggest thing is loot density is the biggest key. I gotta say, I think it's kind of crazy that 2 months into the game, we're still kind of like at this trying to figure out the best ways to find blueprints. Like, the system is still that much a question mark that we don't know the definitive methodology for how to find blueprints and specific blueprints, which is a kudos to Embark for that, making something that's that engaging that there are still questions this late into the game's life. But it appears to be that one of the biggest things impacting this is the percentage of drops is the most stable constant here. So theoretically, let's say you have a 1% drop chance for a blueprint, which I actually think, I want to say it was Gaming Merchant who even tested that out, and it comes to around that number. But if that's the case, you end up having the same chance at its core of looting either day raids or night raids. 1 container out of 100 looted will end up giving you a blueprint. Again, in theory. Now, why some of these may feel stronger than others is because you end up seeing higher densities of loot in some of those map conditions. But if it is something that's based upon the percentage, well, then you can take those same odds, apply them to regular map conditions where other players may not be as aggressive, as hostile, or there may just not be as many people looking for them in there because they're thinking more so about the night raids, cold snap, electromagnetic storm, stuff like that. That as a footnote, we do need to mention there are some things that appear to only spawn in some of those, but generally speaking, as blueprints as a whole, you're still going to have a lot of success just looting elsewhere, which then comes down to loot density per map. Damn, you're going to see things like research and admin and testing annex. Those are going to be your like bunch of condensed locations and a higher concentration of loot. Like research and admin, for example. It's one building but has an immense amount of drawers, containers, lockers, breachable locations, and so on, because it's a sort of testing floor, sort of medical floor, where you have all of these things all in one small area. And you're likely to find around, I would say probably, I haven't counted, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's 50 or more containers in that one floor of that building. Hydro is a designated high tier zone, but I feel like I find less blueprints and higher tier items in there as opposed to, again, research and admin and testing, just because there is more containers to actually loot through. Spaceport, Departure, and Control Tower are my favorites. Arrival is also coming in there as well with some of the breachable locations there. But naturally, Launch Tower is also a higher tier zone, but it's also in the middle of everything, isolated, making it more of a gamble, so you'll have to decide if that's worth it to you or not. But Departure, having multiple stories of, again, desks and containers all littered together, great option there. Blue Gate, obviously the underground facilities, I would say are probably the highest density here that we see on that map, but that also becomes a bit of a PvP-centric area as well. Stella Montis, Assembly, and Medical Research, I found those to be, personally and anecdotally speaking, the best luck that I've had there, with again a high density of amount of containers that you can end up searching. But things like Cultural Archives, that's designated as a high tier loot zone, but frankly I just don't find much whenever I go in there. However, again, Stella, PvP Central, so just be careful of that. Buried City, though, I saved this for last because I think pound for pound, Buried City is the best. From Grandioso Apartments, Hospital, Space Travel, Plaza Rosa, Library, there's a ton of areas that are naturally condensed, higher tier spawn rates, and areas we're going to see more containers than not across that map. But here's the thing, with most of the map being residential, you're also bound to find a plenty number of cabinets, drawers, and other containers in every single house, even if it's not in a designated higher or mid-tier loot zone. You're going to end up seeing a large number of things that you can end up looting across that entire map. And with basically, again, everything being housing and residential, that provides cover from above, whether it be ARC or other raiders. So it's kind of a gold mine. True story, I have about 6 or 7 hours of playtime since the wipe under my belt. Oh, he said 6, 7. That with limited playtime here because the holidays are taking precedent, seeing family and friends, all that kind of stuff. Gaming, of course, is the secondary item there. But again, 6 to 7 hours or so. I think I have about like 10 blueprints since the reset already, just from Buried City. I have not played and looted on any other map. The other maps that I did play on, I did actually go just for like quest stuff. But other than that, all of my playtime has been running my loot route on Buried City. So keep that in mind. Additionally, there are some things that we do have to consider with specific map conditions and areas of the map. Some things, one thing that I've seen tossed around a lot is wolf packs appear to primarily spawn within night raids. I want to say the Tempest also was something that was predominantly electromagnetic storm before the wipe as well. That one off the top of my head, I can't remember if that's exactly right or not, but there are definitely a few blueprints that are condition specific. But then you'll have things like Hospital is a great way to end up getting augments, where hilariously speaking, again, from my own personal and anecdotal perspective, this was one of those things that I wanted a Mark III augment for the entire air quote like first season that we had before the wipe. I found one like a day or two before the wipe after they changed the blueprint spawn rates. But in my first probably 10 to 15 raids after the wipe, I ended up finding 2 Mark III augments in Hospital. Additionally, other things like defib spawns are oftentimes in those medical areas as well. So thematically speaking, some of those do end up having some correlation. So if you think about where you're going to be looting, you can maybe even sometimes figure out what kind of things you'll end up getting back. And finally, when we talk about blueprints, trials, it's not a guarantee, but it's always nice to try and do these trials, not only for the end of season rewards and everything like that, but it also is always a nice little bonus for what you end up getting for each star completion. And it is something that does reward quite frequently some blueprints. Not a guarantee, but it's also one of those things, just like, why wouldn't you try it? Next, let's talk about some skill points, because frankly, whenever I take a look at the skill tree that I had before the wipe, there's a couple of things that I think that I would have done differently. And had I not taken the wipe, I probably would have reset my skill tree to try it out again and to readjust some of the positioning of things I had. So with the wipe, you can have anywhere up to 6 different skill points to use immediately. You have 1 right out of the gate at level 0, and then upwards of 5 depending on what you end up getting for however many million in value your stash was worth at the time of the expedition. Now, personally speaking, I still ended up using mine on the mobility to start. However, the second wing is where things started to differ. So mobility, I ended up putting 1 point into Nimble Climber, so then I could end up getting Marathon Runner and Youthful Lungs. I maxed those out ASAP, just because simply to me, stamina is the most important thing here when I'm trying to traverse the map. Now, in the first go around with this right after launch, I immediately went to the survival branch of the tree, because at the time, I mean, of course, Security Breach is something that was incredibly beneficial pre-patch, or rather pre-both patches, because not only one did we see recently they introduced dynamic spawns to these security lockers, you also ended up having a loot reduction in terms of the rarities you'd end up seeing on a regular rotation with a Security Breach a couple of weeks after the game's launch. So I had already started, and there was no reset point at that point, so I just kind of said, screw it, I'm going for it. Still went for it no matter what. But having the ability to do this over again now at this point, and with a reset now from here on out, I think I'd personally change and go to conditioning first, where I'd put 1 point initially into Used to the Weight, and then max out Gentle Pressure and Proficient Prior. Gentle Pressure making less noise when breaching, and Proficient Prior breaching doors and containers taking less time. Now, I do that because, especially with the loot route that I've been running, I do end up breaking into those breachable rooms a bit more, and oftentimes you will see higher tier loot behind those breachable doors. So the ability to do that, and if they're in a dense area where other players could be, doing it quicker and quieter could be life or death. Now that said, afterwards, I will start and have already started jumping over to the survival branch, where I'll initially end up putting 1 point into Agile Croucher, so I end up getting that, of course, extension of the branch going further. Then I'll end up going to either Revitalizing Squat or Looter's Instinct. Revitalizing Squat is only going to end up getting 1 point, so this might be one of the more beneficial ones to do earlier, because by putting 1 point in, it allows you to end up using your next skill point on in-round crafting, which is incredibly beneficial, and I would highly recommend. So that's going in there immediately. Then I jump back up to Looter's Instinct and Silent Scavenger, maxing those 2 out. Now, before we can continue to move on, we do need to put 2 more points into Agile Croucher, and then 1 point into Suffer in Silence and/or Good as New. Personally speaking, I do Suffer in Silence so that I can end up getting to Broad Shoulders quicker. That way I can end up maxing that out and taking, I believe it's 10 additional pounds of maximum weight you can end up carrying, as well as having Traveling Tinkerer, which is probably what I would actually do before maxing out Broad Shoulders. I could either do it initially, even before doing my first point into Broad Shoulders, or doing a couple into Broad Shoulders and then Traveling Tinkerer. But that allows you to craft even more items in game. That allows you to craft things like hatch keys, which, depending on what type of run you end up going on, loot runs, some locations, and run routes do end up having the ability to end up getting a ton of loot plus all of the items to craft a hatch key right there. So that was something that was incredibly beneficial whenever I was trying to do my last couple of runs here, getting the 5 mil for the expedition, where I ended up getting my last day of the expedition playing. I ended up getting, I think, like 3.2 million or something like that in my last 12 hours or so of game time. All of which kind of running a similar route of anywhere from 70 to 100,000 in value and crafting a hatch key because of that. Now, from there on, you can end up, I think, going any way you want. Those are my sort of big key focal points of what you can end up doing for the skill trees. Security Breach, I still think, is worth it if you do want to max things out to go that way. But, of course, it does take quite a bit of time to get there. But you could also end up doing more things in mobility or conditioning. But the core of which, I think that's my starting point that I would recommend to anybody. And finally, the last thing I want to mention here is quests. This can be a good way to get additional loot. We have a guide for every single quest here on the channel. I'll put an annotation on screen here for you guys if you want to check that out. But personally speaking, quests, I'm kind of taking a backseat to this time around on this wipe. I'll absolutely do them eventually, but I'm prioritizing ranking up, getting blueprints via looting, and getting my skills ranked up further before I jump into something that will send me across the map rather than min-maxing, looting a whole ton and all that kind of stuff that it just like prolongs what I want to do. I'm doing what I think is more important to my gameplay loop first and foremost, and then tackling the extracurricular stuff of quests that I've already done for once. And again, with them all being the same rewards, cutscenes, so on and so forth, everything the same, I know how it ends up working out this time around, that I don't really necessarily need to find that, I feel, for my gameplay loop, personally speaking. But anyways, that's where we're going to wrap it up. Wanted to share with you guys a few tips that, having grinded out yesterday, now going into the holidays with some time off, just want to share some tips that were beneficial to me with the start of my reset journey that hopefully can be beneficial to you. But that's where we're going to wrap it up. So let me know your thoughts down below. Anything you'd like to add to the list, anything in particular you like, dislike, let me know. But if you guys enjoyed the video, you found it at all insightful, do me a favor and drop a like on it. And if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a single thing regarding all things Arc Raiders and other FPS content. I'd love to have you in the community. But for now, thanks so much for watching. My name has been Espresso. I'll see you later. Take care and peace.